Birmingham had a lot happening. There were bombings in Birmingham. There were bombings of churches. There were bombings of people's homes. At that time, there were bombings in other parts of the country, even on that same day, down in Florida and other parts of the country in the South. It seemed like they may have been coordinated. Were you afraid at all? Like after you got involved in this because you found the bag, did you have any worry or any fear, or were you just was that something that didn't cross your mind?
Honestly, it
Honestly.
didn't cross my mind.
See, that might be your superhero characteristic right there. You might be the man without fear. You may
I
be.
don't know what that, but at the time, I did. And like you said, it might have been happening. I didn't even know that it happened down there. Nothing like that when it happened here. In other words, I don't even know that.
Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Oh, woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom.
I am the Reverend Lukata Mjumbe. I'm the Executive Director of the Alabama African American Civil Rights Heritage Sites Consortium, and welcome to this episode of the Stayed on Freedom podcast. Bombingham was a nickname for Birmingham, Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. Dynamite was often the domestic terrorist weapon of choice, used by white supremacists in Alabama and across the South. The bombings were initially used against African Americans attempting to move into neighborhoods with entirely white segregated residents. The bombings targeted the homes of lawyers like attorney Arthur Shores. Arthur Shores was the dean of attorneys of the civil rights movement in Birmingham. And our consortium offices, where I am sitting right now, is the location of Attorney Shore's old law offices. But holy places were not safe from the forces of hatred either. The dynamite bombings were used against pastors like the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, the pastor of historic Beth-El Baptist Church. Both his home and church were bombed more than any other during the movement here in Birmingham. Foot soldiers, an extraordinary people working for racial desegregation and equality, were terrorized by the hatred of members of the Ku Klux Klan that often enjoyed the open or under the sheet support from local law enforcement offices like that of so-called Public Safety Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor. Now, one neighborhood within Birmingham experienced so many bombings, it developed the nickname Dynamite Hill. And this was the community of Angela Davis's childhood home, the community of Old Sardis Baptist Church, which was the location of the founding of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights in June of 1956. And the legend says that Old Sardis was not bombed because of its borderline location and close proximity to a Jewish cemetery. However, on April 28, 1958, a synagogue, Temple Beth-El, that owned one of those cemeteries near Dynamite Hill, was targeted itself with a bomb with 54 sticks of dynamite. Now, we don't know why that bomb didn't explode, but what we do know is that it was discovered by an ordinary yet extraordinary 18-year-old African-American janitor named James Pruitt. While cleaning outside of the synagogue, he found that bomb. He reported it, and he saved potentially thousands of lives and millions of dollars of property. If that bomb had exploded, it would have added to the list of 50 dynamite bombings documented between 1947 and 1965. The bombing of Temple Beth-El would have been a tragic prelude to what would shock the world later in 1963 when 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama was bombed, killing 4 little girls. 18-year-old James Pruitt did not talk to his family about what almost happened at Temple Beth-El back in 1958. This ordinary young man who never sought any attention for what he did did not even tell the story decades later as a husband, a father, and grandfather to his wife, to his children, or his grandchildren. He never talked about it and fully shared his story publicly until now. Our public history director, Jessica O'Connor, and I sat down with Mr. James Pruitt, now 85 years old, members of his family, and with Margaret Norman, an active member of Temple Beth-El today, who is seeking to preserve the holy history of her community and the hero that interrupted what could have been a terribly tragic history. Let's look back to 1958 and remember the history of hatred, holy places, and heroes.
My name is James Pruitt. I am 18 years old. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I work as a janitor at the Jewish temple called Beth-El on the south side. This is the first job that I got coming out after graduating high school. April 28, 1958 started off as a regular ordinary day to me. It was a Monday. I went to work ready to work, to check in, to clean up, to help as they needed me. While I was cleaning outside the temple, I saw something that didn't look right. It was a suitcase, bag, or something with something sticking out of it. I didn't touch it. I guess I knew better, and something told me that I needed to tell somebody. So I ran and told my supervisor. I later found out that it was a bomb with a lot of dynamite. It would have hurt a lot of people and some could have got killed. That happens sometimes in Birmingham. I'm happy that nothing happened on that day, but I wasn't trying to be nobody's hero. I didn't go around telling it to people. It was just a regular, ordinary day. A Monday. Just one of those days.
Welcome. I am so blessed and honored to be with you, Mr. Pruitt, to be able to talk with you, to listen, and to remember about what happened here in April of 1958. Now, beginning this conversation, I'd just like to hear more about you. You were born here in Birmingham, Alabama, and many of us don't have any idea what that was like. So tell us a little bit, what was it like to grow up in Birmingham, Alabama in the 1950s and in the 1940s and the last several decades?
Well, I went to Urban High School and finished there, and after I left there, I graduated from Urban High. I started looking for a job, and it was kind of difficult out there, looking for a job and so forth, but good Lord let me found one, and there it is. And I happened to come to this place, and they hired me on the spot and so forth, and I worked here about, I said 3 or 4 years, in other words, and that was it.
So coming out of high school, you came to work at Temple Beth-El here in Birmingham, Alabama. What did you do here? What was your job?
Well, my main job was to go outside and check the outside and pick up paper and stuff, and see was the premise clean and everything, and I did that, and I think then I was walking around the building, and of course and everything, and I looked over there and saw this bomb, and I didn't know what it were, but I saw it over there.
Right.
So
Were you working here full time? Were you here
full time.
So you were here 5 days a week, 6, 7 days a week? Do you remember?
Full time.
When you would first come to work on a regular day, do you remember what time you would come here and what you would do when you first got here?
I think we would open up. Well, I was due at 7 o'clock, and that's what time I would get here. Probably a little 5 or 10 minutes, a little early, and stand out there and wait till someone open the gate or door, let me in and everything. Yeah.
And so tell me about that. I mean, I've never worked at a Jewish synagogue. Was this your first time coming in contact with this community? Tell me about what that experience was like. What was it like? What did they do that was different than maybe what you were used to seeing in your life?
They didn't do anything different for me. It was what I would have to come and do. In other words, and I had no complaint about it. In other words, he tell me to do this, I would do it. In other words, that's what it was. Like I said, I had just got out of high school and everything. And I would wait out there till someone come in open the door, and then they come in open the door, and I don't know where we were hitting the clock or whatever. You had to come in and tell the man or something, you hear or something like that. I'm not sure. And then you go He tell you, well, I want you to do this to it or do something else. Whatever he tell you to do, you go on and do it and try to do it and everything.
And so they used to have prayer services or meetings sometimes early in the morning. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the only time, the meetings that I would know that they would have was on a Saturday. That's when I come in and set up the table and everything. Upstairs, I call it upstairs, yeah. And like I said, it'll be 5 or 10, maybe I'd say 5 or 10 of them, and they come in and say what they're going to do or whatever, in other words, and then table already set, they eating, drinking, whatever, talking, that's it.
What they eat and drink?
Bread and drinking, well, whiskey and everything.
All right. Well, that's a little different what they do in my church. They do communion wine, and sometimes that's Welch's grape juice. But
Well, maybe it was grape juice they were drinking. I don't know.
well, they may be a little more authentic.
maybe.
The Jewish community is older than the Christian community. So they may have been taking it back to the roots.
Maybe.
I hear you. So I want to ask you a little more about what was happening at that time, and I mean, and really, Birmingham had a lot happening. There were bombings in Birmingham. There were bombings of churches. There were bombings of people's homes. At that time, there were bombings in other parts of the country, even on that same day, down in Florida, and other parts of the country in the South. It seemed like they may have been coordinated. Were you afraid at all? Like after you got involved in this because you found the bag, did you have any worry or any fear, or were you just was that something that didn't cross your mind?
Honestly,
Honestly,
it didn't cross my mind.
See, that might be your superhero characteristic right there. You might be the man without fear. You may be.
I don't know what that, but at the time, I did. And like you said, it might have been happening. I didn't even know that it happened down there. Nothing like that when it happened here. In other words, I don't even know that.
It's always important to note that today we are a diverse community in many ways. In the 1950s and 1960s, this would have been a primarily Ashkenazi community, so a Jewish community of sort of European, whether Western or Eastern European descent. So we can definitely talk about the sort of complications and ambiguities of race, but most people in the Jewish community at that time would present as white and be able to sort of pass as white in that way.
You mentioned that there's a significant growth of violence targeting both communities. We look at Dynamite Hill specifically. What's going on for the Jewish community around that time?
So I think it's so interesting, and when you look at sort of the attempted bombing of Temple Beth-El, that's sort of what you see as the most obvious instance of violence targeting the Jewish community at that time, even though the bomb, of course, thankfully, does not go off and is found by Mr. Pruitt. But certainly you see across the South and here in Birmingham too, a rise in sort of general anti-Semitism at that time. So you do see, if you look at, and I'm sure you all have seen this, flyers from groups like the National States Rights Party, you might see anti-Semitic rhetoric that draws a connection between Jews, civil rights, communism. It's part of a sort of general conspiracy mindset that you see particularly from white supremacist hate groups that draw that connection even when it's not there. So, for our community, we did have a few members of our community who were very vocal on these issues, who were on the front lines. Our rabbi in 1958 was not particularly vocal. In fact, the rabbi down the street, Rabbi Grafman, was much more so, and his story is fascinating in its own right. And so when you look at sort of the targeting of Temple Beth-El in 1958 and that general rise in anti-Semitism, it's really coming from these sort of conspiracy theories that are interacting with the rise of the freedom movement in the South at that time.
So in April of 1958, and you were working here as a janitor at Temple Beth-El, helping to clean up the outside of the property. You also had shared earlier about some of the things that you did with folding up some of the garments and some of the kippahs inside of the building as well. Tell us, what time of day was it? Was it early in the morning? Was it?
I think it was about 11:30, 11 or 12 o'clock, something like that. I'm not sure, but I had made my round and I had come back in here and I had went back outside just to just to take a second look and so forth. And when I got up there, that's when I found the bomb and everything. And I just came on back in and reported to my supervisor, Mr. Howard. And
Did you know it was a bomb when you first looked at it? What did you see when you first noticed it?
It didn't look like no bomb to me. It looked like a suitcase or something, in other words. That's when I went close and looked in it. When I looked in there, then I seen something sticking out. I didn't know what it were, but I seen something sticking out, but I could tell it was something. So I just went and reported to him and let him come out here and make the judgment.
So there was a looked like a suitcase.
Yeah, a suitcase.
You remember what color it was?
I would say it was black or either brown or something like that.
So dark colored,
Yeah, it
dark
was.
colored bag. When we look back at the history in the reports, it says that there were 54 sticks of dynamite in there. Now, a lot of people may have never seen dynamite. Had you seen dynamite before? What it
Never
looked
had
like?
seen dynamite before.
Yeah. So there was something that was sticking out,
Something was
but you knew it wasn't something that was supposed to be there.
That is correct.
And tell me who you reported it to.
To Mr. Howard, my supervisor.
What'd you say to Mr. Harvey?
I told him that there was something out there, you need to come and check it. And he said, well, okay, Pruitt. That's what he told me. He called me Pruitt. Okay, well, we'll come out there in a few minutes. But I went on doing my daily chores, whatever it was.
So when did you find out that what you had discovered was actually a bomb?
Well, I could look in the bag. I seen what it were, but I didn't know what it were. To tell you the truth, I could see what it were, but that's when I called him and told him to come and see what it were. And after that, then I realized it was a bomb. Then after everybody started talking about it, and
Right.
everything, yeah.
Did they bring you back in and ask you any questions? Did they say anything more to you about it?
Not at all. Not that I can remember. They did.
Some of the experts said that if the fuse had actually burned all the way down, it had exploded, that this entire building could have been destroyed. I mean, did you ever have time to kind of think about like how serious this ordinary, regular situation actually was? Like what could have happened?
Well, you talking about at the time? Then I didn't. Like I said, it wasn't on my mind. In other words, I was teenager, and other things was on my mind. I didn't even care about nothing like that. Well, I cared in a sense now than I did then. I think about it now because it could have, like I said, it could have hurt a lot of people.
Yeah.
Could have hurt a lot of people.
Yeah. When you were younger, you undoubtedly heard about or maybe even knew people who were affected by what they called Bombingham or Dynamite Hill, and homes and different places and even churches that were bombed by dynamite. Do you remember any of that growing up?
Yes, I remember the 16th Street Church got bombed and everything. In other words, killed those 4 kids. In other words, that brought back a lot of memories that happened over here and everything, but I didn't think anything. And I remember some preacher over there in North Birmingham, they had left a bomb in the church. Something, it didn't go off, it went off or something like that. And things like that, it just, I don't know, just bothered me, I guess, whatever.
After you were able to give the report, did you get any feedback? Was there any response from other members of the synagogue, of the temple? Did they say anything to you? Did anybody say thank you to you then? Or did they even know that you were the one that found it?
Only thing that I can remember, it was one guy met me out there in the hall. I think it was the hall. He was named, I think, Ziegler or something like that, but he had on a brown or black suit or something. He had a skull cap on and had glasses on. Now, I don't know, but his name, he came and told me, he said, Pruitt, you did a nice job. Said, just keep the work up. And he shook my hand, and that was it. I went on back to my job, and whatever, he left, and I went back to my job, yeah.
It's one of those days.
One of those days.
You know, it was interesting to me. Do you have any recollection of the name Bull Connor? And because he had some things to say about this attempted bombing as well. What do you remember of him and of that name?
Well, I remember Mr. Connor once. I was on the airport. I moved from north side to the airport out here, and there was a stand around there on the corner, and we used to be around there. He used to come by there every so often there. We would be on the corner, you know, like kids be on the corner and everything. He would tell us, you all better get home. In other words, I'm gonna be back by here about 11 or 12 o'clock, and if you're not at home, in other words, you're going to jail. Just like that. We were scattering, leaving. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I asked you about Bull Connor because as I've talked with elders and who remember that time, they have similar type of stories and descriptions of how he was, and even some of the churches that were bombed, like the church of Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, historic Beth-El Baptist Church. He didn't have a whole lot of kind words to say or even supportive things to say. But it was interesting that after this attempted bombing, he came out, he wrote a letter to the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. He even called for the death penalty for anyone who was found to be responsible for bombing houses of worship. And he had a lot of words of support that he said, and I just thought that was ironic to hear him say that, considering what his history is in the rest of Birmingham and as it relates to these bombings.
Even though the police did come out in support of this community, and that's an important part of the story because it shows those real complications of, I think, our position in the community at the time, that there was support from Bull Connor, who of course was not lending that support to other churches, religious institutions that were facing violence. But I do think that they did not actually want to solve the bombing, and that they probably could have if they'd wanted to.
And I really, to me, some of Bull Connor's statements are suspect.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean,
I think you have to take a grain of salt.
Yeah, because he says anyone, if you bomb a home, if you bomb a place of worship, whatever, these folks should get the death penalty. I mean, certainly it's in line with his violent character that, just kill people as a result of it. But I mean, how deeply committed was he to unrooting white supremacist forces that may have been targeting Temple Beth-El? How committed was he really in terms of finding those who were responsible? It's hard for me to read those words and to see the name Eugene Bull Connor attached to it and say, oh, well, that sounds consistent with who he was historically.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did see it as a line crossed. I think unlike other instances of violence, he probably didn't know about it in advance. I think that he saw it as an unsanctioned attack, but to your point, I think there were I think that there was enough evidence for him to probably know who it was, and he ultimately there was not a motivation to actually convict that person. But I think this is such a great example of, why I shared that detail is because, it shows that, for someone like Mr. Pruitt, who, it was just an ordinary day, who may think that they don't remember so much, these little details actually can shed a lot of light on events in new ways. And in terms of sort of how Mr. Pruitt is remembered by this congregation, I mean, I think that when we started really deeply looking into the attempted bombing in 2020, there was a lot of new information that started coming to light because in many ways the congregation, I think, it was part of the memory here. It was something that people would sort of share with each other, but it hadn't really been sort of marked historically, and I think people held it a little bit at an arm's length in some ways. And so when we started looking at newspaper articles and really looking at our documents and seeing Mr. Pruitt's name, there was really a sort of immediate sense of, well, we really would like to know more about this person. There weren't really so many people who at this point were, adults at the time that were working here and when he was working here and remembered him. And so we were pretty immediately interested in finding him and speaking to him. And I think now that we've been doing this project for 5 years, his name is increasingly remembered by the congregation as part of the story. And I'm thrilled by that because I think he played a really important role here, by making that choice, by reporting the bomb. And I think he deserves to be part of the congregation's memory.
And thank you for finding him, and thank you for helping Temple Beth-El to remember. We have had the blessed opportunity to meet with a patriarch in your family, a leader in your family, Mr. James Pruitt, who has told us about his amazing history that he didn't consider to be all that amazing. that he considered to be just an ordinary day on the job at work back on April the 28th, 1958, where he interrupted something. He interrupted a tragic history that could have unfolded. So I'm here with you, and I'd like for you to introduce yourselves. I think I got you down. That's Tracy, Josiah, Angie, and James Jr. here. But Tracy, tell us about how and was this the first time that you
Yes.
learned about it? So tell me about how you came to know about this history.
Well, actually, my husband was contacted, Robert Wimberly, and he said that someone was contacting him about an attempted bombing that took place, and was he married to Tracy Pruitt, and is James Pruitt his father-in-law? And of course, I've already prepped him not to answer questions from different people because I just wasn't sure. It's so
Right.
much going on, and I had never heard the story, so I thought that can't be my dad. That's a scam. Don't answer any questions about it. But they were persistent, and they continued reaching out. And he said, I'm going to call your dad just to find out. And lo and behold, he called me back and said, Tracy, that was your dad. Your dad actually is the person that they're trying to reach. And he is the person in this story. And so once
Wow.
we started conversating and talking with Margaret, and she wanted us to touch base with my dad, and I talked to him and asked him if it was okay if they would reach out to him and let's get on three-way call because I live in Florida now. And he agreed, and he started telling us about it again. And it was just really a proud moment. We've all been through, the Birmingham city school systems, and I don't recall it in high school hearing that story. But if my brother heard it, somewhat, we still never knew anything about it. His mom, he never told his parents, his own parents. He just did what he did that day and continued to live and just move on and,
He
just
wasn't
live.
looking for attention,
He
wasn't
wasn't.
looking for fame.
And even still now.
Right, even still, he was like, it's just a regular day,
Yes,
just a regular day. Do you think it's important that we know this history?
absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Josiah, you want to tell us about that? Do you think it's important that we know the history of your grandfather?
Of course, because it's it's more than just any type of history. It's our history, and just coming from a family, I didn't even know that this happened until my mother told me. And now knowing that my grandfather is a huge part of this amazing church and this amazing facility, and it's just a blessing, and I'm just proud. More than words can even say.
Yes. So for you, it was another day,
Just another day.
an ordinary day where something extraordinary happened.
It did.
But then many decades later, it has come back. And when I have looked at this history, so you didn't talk to your family about this later, like your children, your grandchildren. This wasn't something that when you sat around the dinner table or where you were having family reunions, you wouldn't tell this story to people then.
Well, this all happened before I was even married, in other words. But after I got married, in other words, I didn't even tell my wife about it. She didn't even know about it.
Wow.
She passed and still don't know about it. And they just learned about it. I didn't think it was my business to go in. Well, I just didn't talk about it. That's what it was. It just didn't cross my mind.
Mr. James Pruitt's name is not on the historical marker outside of Temple Beth-El. The Alabama Historical Commission's Historic Marker Program generally restricts the inclusion of living individuals' names except under special circumstances. We believe that this circumstance is special, to say the least. We must remember these ordinary, extraordinary stories We ask that you support the consortium in our mission to preserve historic structures, protect authentic histories, and promote the legacy of empowerment by becoming a recurring giver and a monthly supporter of the consortium today by visiting us at our website at www.aacrhsc.org or clicking on the link in the description of this podcast. Join us and help us to remain stayed on freedom.
Stay on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Walking and talking with my mind. Stay on freedom. Oh, walking and talking with my mind. Stay on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind. Stay on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Singing and praying. Singing and praying.